Okay, kicking off tonight's event. Welcome, everyone. We'll get started here in just a moment. Let's let our guests come into the room. Okay, if you're joining us for the first time, welcome. We're very happy to see you here. If you are one of our repeat guests, thank you again, as always, for joining us for our events. We really appreciate you coming back and participating and asking great questions and helping us to make these events more and more successful each time. So thanks to everyone for joining us tonight. Tell us where you're joining us from today. We'd love to know where in the world you're doing research or whatever work you're doing. Please let us know where you are. And we'd love to know also what kind of work you're doing. Are you working in a research field? Are you a library sciences manager, a funder, or a professor? Or let us know what you're doing. Tonight's event is an important one. It's writing for a global audience for maximum reach and readability. And who better to walk us through this process? I think I'm pointing in the right direction, is my friend and colleague, Professor Gareth Dyke. Professor, how is everything going today?
Brilliant, thanks. Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. I hope everybody joining us is also in a positive frame of mind. How are you, Scott? How's everything in the Tokyo evening? Everything's going well?
Fantastically well. Yeah, it's still the steamy peak of summer. The cicadas are still buzzing in the trees, at least for now. That's sort of a sign that summer is coming to a close. Otherwise, everything is great. Yeah, thank you for asking, and hope our audience is doing wonderfully well, no matter where you are in the world today. Let's take a look at where our guests are joining us from. Oh, fantastic. We've got guests joining us from Ethiopia, Portugal, Budapest, Hungary. I wonder who that was. Malaysia, fantastic. India, Pakistan. Excellent. We've got folks coming from absolutely everywhere. It's wonderful.
It's really good to see everybody. Yeah, do let us know. We like to know. We like to see people from all over the world joining these events. But good afternoon if it's the evening for you, or good morning, or good late evening if you're in Asia like Scott is. And we're doing this, right, Scott, on behalf of our friends and colleagues at Bentham Science. So maybe a few words about Bentham Science to kick things off.
Please do. On behalf of Bentham Science, we really appreciate their sponsoring this series of events. And if you're not familiar with Bentham Science, if you're new to Bentham, Bentham, as it says on the slide here, is a leading scientific, technical, and medical research publisher with journals and ebooks and print books in various fields and disciplines. And it's worth mentioning that Bentham has one of the most robust peer review systems of any publisher, and Bentham is a full member of COPE, the Committee on Publication Ethics, and is committed to ethics, particularly in areas such as ethical and robust peer review. You can also investigate and explore Bentham Science's range of journals and books. You can visit the Bentham Science site. I'll put a link into the chat window in just a moment here. And it's also worth mentioning that if you are a library sciences manager on behalf of your institution, you can get a free trial for Bentham's books and journals. At the end of the event today, we'll give you a QR code that you can click on. And with that code, you can get access to 3 months of a completely free trial. I'll put a link also into the chat so that you know where to find it. And that way, there's no commitment whatsoever, but you can explore Bentham's selection of journals at your institution. So we'll put a link in the chat in just a moment here. So feel free to try the free trial if you're representing your institution today. Gareth.
Or if you know a librarian, maybe you're friends with one, who
Mm.
knows? You can always send the link to somebody else that you know, like in your network, because this is a really great opportunity. 160 plus journals, many of them in Scopus, many of them listed in Science Direct now. So you've got a fantastic opportunity to have a look at the Bentham Science content. Maybe choose a Bentham Science journal for your next research article. And we're going to show you in this event, right, Scott, some tips and tricks for managing that process and thinking a little bit more about how you can effectively write your next research article. Great stuff.
Absolutely. And writing for a global audience is absolutely essential if you are a working researcher. And Gareth, you and I both work very closely with researchers, helping researchers from all disciplines to communicate their science to a global audience. So that is our goal today. So hope you enjoy the event, everyone. Thank you, as always, Professor, for lending us your expertise. And I'll interact in the chat from now. So I'll switch my camera off, but I'll be popping up from time to time just to annoy poor Gareth here. So everyone enjoy the event, and thank you again, Professor. Over to you.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you, Scott. Always fantastic to do these events together. Scott will be back in a moment. As he mentioned, we've got a few polls scattered throughout our webinar today, this evening, to make sure to help to ensure that you're still with us, that you're still awake. And of course, if you have any questions, you can ask them at the end. We're going to have lots of time at the end of our event today for a Q&A. So do have those questions ready, and we'll start off by thinking about how you can build an effective research article, how you can make your research easily understandable, achieve maximum reach and readability with your English, with your language. And of course, as we often do, as we often start these events by looking at this academic publishing wheel of fortune, the hamster wheel. We go round it and round it and round it all the time. As academics, you've probably got ideas. You're probably applying for funding. Maybe you're collecting data for some of those research projects that you're working on at the moment, trying to find a journal. Today we're going to talk about writing, but we do have lots of other webinars. You can view them on the Bentham Science YouTube channel if you'd like to get more training, more access to tips and tricks all the way round the academic hamster wheel, the publication hamster wheel. Because at the end of the day, what we are here to do, Scott and I, with these training events, with these webinars, is to help you ensure that your research, your fantastic research, gets written up and published and gets noticed, gets citations, gets picked up by other researchers, gets used by other researchers. And that begins, of course, with journal selection. Did you know that more than 2 million, that's right, 2 million research articles are published in the more than 60,000 journals out there in English every year, and about 30,000 papers get published every month just in the medical and health sciences. So selecting a journal, targeting a journal, deciding on how you're going to write up your research, make sure it achieves maximum impact, is really all important. And we also do encourage you at the start of this event to have a quick think about why you want to get your next research paper published. Why do you want to publish? Because your motivations as a researcher are going to be quite different from the motivations of editors and peer reviewers. Perhaps you want to get funded. Perhaps you want to get promoted, as I always used to try and fail to do at my university. Perhaps you simply want to develop research and build your research area. Or, as is often the case with our event attendees, perhaps you need to get published in a Scopus journal to get your master's or get your PhD. These could be your motivations. They are going to be quite different to the motivations of editors and peer reviewers working for journals and looking at incoming submissions. So let's keep that in mind as we get started thinking about targeting our research to journals in this event. Because when you make a submission to a journal, to an academic journal, the first thing that happens is that that article gets put through what we call editorial triage. Desk editors, people working at journals, have a quick look at your submission and they ask themselves a number of key questions. Does this research article fit with the journal scope? Does the article have a clear message? Is it original? Is it important? Is it true? Of course. And there'll be a number of integrity checks, research integrity checks that are carried out by journals and publishers. And also, they will be thinking, is this research relevant to the readers of this journal. So when we start to think about putting papers together and writing them and creating research articles for successful publication, we've also got to think about how we can sell that research to journal editors, how we can get the work through the triage process. Because of course, higher impact factor journals want to maintain those higher rejection rates. And of course, if you've ever sent a paper to a really big journal like Nature, Science, for example, they do try to reject as many papers as possible. 9 out of 10 submissions are going to get rejected. So thinking about how you can package and sell your research to a fantastic journal is part of what we're going to talk about in our event today as we get started thinking about putting the paper together. You've done the research, you've collected the data, you know what your message is going to be. What other things do you need to think about before you start to write the paper up for submission? 3 things that you need to know. Very, very important. The first of those is your message. What is it about the research that you've just completed, about the piece of data that you've just collected, about the story that you have to tell in your research paper that's really, really, really important for other researchers to know? What's the message? Here's a real photo of my dear grandmother. I always used to try to explain to her about my research. This is a great technique, right, Scott? How we can explain the message in our research to other people who might not have such a good understanding as we do about the research.
This is one of my favorite slides, and it's one of the simplest slides that we have in our talk today. And I think it's very important to remember that we're communicating to people who may not be specialists in our field, that we need to be able to simplify that message, just as you said, if you're explaining this to your grandmother or to someone on the bus. And this is great preparation for example, making an elevator pitch at a conference. If you're at a research conference and you have 30 seconds to explain your research to someone who's not a specialist in your field, are you prepared to do that? You should be prepared to do that at all times, to promote your research every chance that you get in the simplest possible terms. So great advice from you, Professor. Thank you for sharing this.
It's absolutely true. And if you listen to our conference and presentation skills events and training, this is what we'll recommend. You should at all times be ready to answer those kinds of questions about your research, because you never know who you're going to meet, and you do want a quick, snappy, easy to understand message about your research. So this is thing number 1 to know before you start to write. What is the message of the paper, of the piece of research that you plan to publish? Because if editors can't figure out your message, they're going to reject your paper. They'll also reject your study if you haven't convinced them that it's important for their journal. They're going to think, if I'm interested, then my readers will be as well. So that's thing number 1 to have in mind before you begin to write. You're going to check the original nature of your results, the story, the take-home message, and think, is this new and interesting? And if so, why? How does my work relate to a currently hot topic? What's new and challenging? Do I provide a solution here to a difficult problem? And it's a great exercise to go through, as Scott was saying. Try to put this message into 1 or 2 sentences. That could evolve into the title of your research paper, or part of the method, or the end of the introduction. But preparing an effective, easy to understand message is really, really key. And the second thing to know, thing number 2 to know before you start to write, is your audience. Who's going to be reading the paper? Which journal are you going to be sending the research to? Message and audience are 2 of those 3 things to have in mind before you begin the writing process. Selecting a journal. Aim high. Go for better journals with higher impact factors first. Choose appropriately, of course. And we are here, Scott and I, in collaboration with our dear friends at Bentham Science, help you learn to sell and manage your submissions to journals effectively. That's what we do. That's why we run these events. That's what all of this is about. So what are the 2 things you need to know to begin with? Message and audience. Let's just check that you're still awake with a quick poll. Scott.
Okay, great. Let's try a quick poll. This is an interesting one. I'm going to see what our audience thinks about writing for a global audience of readers. I'll launch the poll here. I hope you can see this on your screen. The question is, on average, this is based on a study from about 2, 3 years ago. On average, how much more time does it take non-English natives to read a scientific article? Apologies, Gareth and I are native English speakers, but we understand because we work with researchers whose first language is not English. We understand that it's not always easy to be a researcher when English is not your first language. How much longer does it take? 10%, 30%, 60%, or 90% longer than a native English reader?
This is really interesting. Let's be really interested to see what the results of this poll are going to be. Interesting, no, Scott? I mean, we talk with lots of non-native speakers all the time, so let's see the answers. It's really quite interesting.
Okay, answers are coming in hot. Okay, let's end the poll there and see what our audience said. Let's say 10% of our audience, excuse me, 7% of our audience believes 10% longer, 43%, 30% longer. The most popular answers by far, 30% and 60%. The answer is actually 90% longer. 90%. So that's almost twice as long for on average, of course, for a non-native of English to read a scientific article. Gareth, any thoughts on this?
I wasn't expecting it would be quite that long, but it does make a lot of sense. I mean, it really is very interesting. And this is why it's so great and so important and so fantastic that we do have now access to all of these AI tools and ways to level that playing field, to make things as easy for non-native English speakers to write and publish and read and consume research as it would be for you or I.
Yeah, absolutely. And those tools are certainly helping. Now, this question is specifically about reading articles. And the reason we raise this point now is because if you are writing a research article, you need to know your audience and recognize that the majority of your audience will not be natives of English. There will be other researchers from all around the world, hopefully, and you'll be reaching a global audience. So that means writing for that global audience. It means writing as clearly and simply as possible without dumbing down the important technical points of your paper. So that is our challenge, including all of the technicalities that you want to include, but also writing in clear, concise, simple, and readable English is always our goal.
That's what we're going to talk about in just a moment in this event. But if you cast your mind back to before the poll, we talked about two of the three things to have in mind before you start to write. Your message, your audience, that target journal, and we're going to prepare to write, thinking about what to do before we get started with the writing process, thinking about, thirdly, the structure of the writing. So your message, your audience, and your structure. Where does structure come from? It comes from your target journal. And for this reason, we always do recommend to researchers that having a journal in mind before you begin the writing process is a great strategy for success. Your message, your audience, and the structure. You can see here the famous outline structure of an IMRAD academic article with a title, an abstract, keywords, and then the main text of the research article itself. Very typical for STM research articles, science, technology, medicine, and mathematics. We'll talk a little bit more about how you can put these different sections together in a moment, but you've got that structure. You've got it from your target journal. And one great trick, one great tip, one way to answer some of the most common questions that we always get in these events: what goes where, what to put in the introduction, how much information to put in the title, the abstract, the introduction, and so on, is to look at other recently published articles in your field, in your target journal, and then copy the structure, because readers need to know where they've come from, where they are now, and where they're going. It's like any kind of story. A plot is needed. Structure. That's thing number 3. Message, audience, and structure as you begin your writing process. And so in this section of our event today, we're going to talk a little bit more about some English tips and tricks for academic writing. Easy to apply techniques and tricks that you can do in your own research in order to avoid this typical rejection letter, right, Scott? We've got loads of letters like this in our collection. Not that great to receive one as an author.
Absolutely. And you also have the experience probably of sending letters like this as your journal editor, and it probably doesn't feel that great either. And yeah, I think it's important to try to understand submission from the editorial side as well. If you're an author submitting, think about the perception of that editor is going to have of the paper you're submitting and how you're submitting it. Professor, I wanted to just quickly go back to that previous slide about storytelling, because this is a question we sometimes get about just a bit forward structure. There we go. At the bottom, a paper is a story. This is a wonderful way to approach a manuscript. I wanted to just mention this because I got a question about this from an author recently. What do we mean when we say a story? Isn't it meant to be a technical document, a scientific document? Yes, but we're telling a narrative. It's a story of discovery. As a researcher, you are an explorer. You're solving mysteries, solving problems, and answering questions. And your manuscript needs to be framed this way, right? Why did you do this study? In other words, what do we want to know? How did you do the study? And what did you find? And what does it mean? Your paper should answer these questions. So when we say a story, we don't mean make it up and make up some kind of fiction. Treat it like you're an explorer or an investigator or a detective solving a mystery. So when we say story, that's what we mean. Your paper should have a narrative of scientific discovery. So I wanted to mention that because an author asked me that recently after one of our events. And yeah, treat your paper like an interesting narrative. You'll pull people in. They want to know how you solve that mystery, and it will make your paper stronger. I just wanted to mention that.
Absolutely fantastic. It's so important to have that clear skill. And we're going to show you, I hope, like how you can develop these kinds of skills in this event, in other events. Again, have a look at the Bentham YouTube channel if you'd like to get access to more training like this. Message, audience, structure, build that story. As Scott was saying, you've got to develop skills and techniques to get your science, your research across to other readers in the papers that you write, but doing it in a simple and easy to understand way. And at the same time, as we've already mentioned, avoiding getting rejected. The paper's terrible. Thanks for asking if we'd like to publish it. It's good, but we're not willing to. The good bits were not original, and the original bits were not good. Often we do see rejections from international publishers in a range of areas and for a range of reasons. As you can see here on this slide, poor English writing, reviewer responses, recycled submissions. We're going to address English and how you can do a few things with your writing to make sure that you don't make some of these kinds of mistakes, because of course a little bit of a slip up can lead, as you can see here, to quite hilarious results. And it's important, as Scott mentioned, your academic research message, your story, is not buried in language issues. We've both worked a lot with researchers. We've both worked a lot with editing companies, researcher solutions companies. There's a big problem for researchers for whom English is not their native language in terms of getting work published. And thankfully, the AI revolution has led to lots of other techniques and tricks that you can apply in your research. Stay tuned for other webinars in this series on that very topic. English is, unfortunately or fortunately, the universal language of scientific communication. And we're going to show you, I hope, in the second half of this event, that the writing process can be beneficial as an intellectual activity in its own right. Remember, it was Winston Churchill who mobilized the English language and sent it into battle. You can develop techniques to write in English, thinking about your project, thinking about your research, and writing down as you think, and then using tools, using techniques, using our help, for example, to get the work into great shape for publication. But as we've already talked about in this event today, message, audience, and structure. When you put your research articles together, you do need to be like our good friend Arnold in the middle of the slide. You need a plan, you need a structure, you need to be a bricklayer. And did you know that Arnold has published more than 20 SCI research articles himself? You can check out his Google Scholar after the event, and he does it by being a bricklayer, having a structure in mind before he begins to write. And that is especially important if English is not your native language. So let's try to think in English and write as we think. Try to write little and often in English. If we translate from our native language, we're going to need to use a subject area specialist. But as we mentioned before, earlier on in this event today, find papers in your field that were recently published in your target journal and use them as templates for the kind of paper that you would like to publish, for style, for shape, for structure, and for presentation. Because in simple English, quite different to other languages, by the way, simple is best. Plain English, short sentences, no unnecessary words, use familiar words, active verbs, passive voice, active verbs, clear style, and good punctuation. We're going to delve in a bit more detail into a number of these aspects in a moment, but unlike other languages, French, Russian, to name but a few, simple is better in English. Keep it simple, make sure people will be able to understand what you're writing, because of course, most of your readers will not be native English language speakers, and that's something that many researchers do forget when putting research papers together. So far in this event, we've talked about those 3 things to know before you start: message, audience, and structure. We've given you a few quick tips for English language writing, and we've got lots of other events, more content on this. Again, the Bentham Science YouTube channel is a great start if you want to get into more of our training. Let's have a quick look now at article structure, some tips and tricks for the different sections as we start to build up, start to put together this IMRAD academic article structure with a title, abstract, keywords, and the main body text of the research paper. Very, very important. We're going to show you some techniques that you can use for the different parts of the research paper in this section of our presentation today, beginning with your title. What makes a great research article title? Well, it needs to be short. Did you know that research has shown that academic research paper articles with titles less than 7 words do tend to get more citations? So a good title needs to adequately describe the contents of your paper, but keep it short. It's got to be effective, right, Scott? Short and sweet with the title is definitely the way to go.
We do have a question from our audience member about titles. We'll get to that at the end of the event today. I love questions about titles. Writing titles is one of my favorite things, working with authors. So if you've asked some questions about titles, we'll be happy to answer those at the end of the event today. So yeah, we'll get to that in just a few minutes. Thanks for your question about titles. Back to you, Professor.
Yeah, absolutely. We're delighted. We hope we'll have lots of time for questions in just a moment. You need to put into your title the main issue, the subject. Be accurate, unambiguous, specific, and complete, and no infrequently used abbreviations. Above all, the most important thing to keep in mind with your article title is you want to attract people's attention. You want to get people thinking, I want to read more. I want to learn more about what this paper is about. It's got to be concise and informative. It's got to contain the most important words related to the topic. Entice your readers, but don't give away the punchline. This is what we call a non-declarative title. Very good strategy, non-declarative. The effects of my new drug on cancer, rather than my new drug is the cure for cancer. Entice people with your title. Make sure they actually read the paper, but don't be over sensational, A number of journals now insist upon study design in the title, but it's got to be short, it's got to be compelling, and try to keep the word count down if possible, getting people interested in reading the study. And this is going to take you quite a lot of work, editing, shuffling, arguing back and forth with your co-authors to make sure that you get something that everybody is happy with. Here's an example that we published a few years ago. You can see in the previous slide just how much work we went through to get to this point. It's worth doing. An effective title, one of the windows into your research paper. It's one of the ways that other people will find your work and read it and use it and cite it, along with the abstract. As you can see here, writing an abstract is a little bit tricky. It's one of the most difficult bits of academic article writing. You've got to have an honest and precise abstract that's going to be able to stand alone in search engines. And often, as we'll see in a moment, the abstract is all that people read. No technical jargon, short and specific, and citing no references. It's the quality of the abstract often that will inform your editor's decision. So let's have another look at what you think about this. Scott's going to pop back up and we're going to run another poll. How are we doing, Scott?
Doing great. I just wanted to ask you, Professor, we could just go back to the previous slide there just for a moment. Great. So the abstract, I love writing abstracts with authors. It's always a very fun exercise. How can you encapsulate your whole paper in a way that's like an advertisement for your paper so that people will seek it out and find it and read it? The abstract is literally that. It's an advertisement for your paper. So let's try a poll question for our guests today. I'm going to launch the poll. Hopefully you can see this on your screen. I hope you can. The question is, what is the most common mistake that authors make with abstracts? This is not, spoiler alert, this is not a scientific survey, but from our experience, what is the most common mistake that authors make with their abstracts? A, too much technical jargon. B, written in a rush. C, too long and unfocused. Or D, doesn't match the full text. I think all of these are common mistakes. Would you say, Professor? What we're looking for is the most common mistake. What do you think, sir?
Oh, I think these are all very common mistakes. Yeah. And I've worked a lot with students from all over the place. I've seen like all of these mistakes, but yeah, like one of them is definitely more common than the others. That's for sure.
Again, not a scientific poll, so forgive us if we don't have the answer you're expecting. Okay, let's see what our audience thinks. I'm going to end the poll there. Okay, looks like most of our audience feel that the most common mistake is that the abstract doesn't match the full text. Well, you might be surprised, but the most common mistake we see is B, written in a rush. We find that very few authors really spend the time to create this, advertising for your paper. It's quite often one of the last things that you'll write. So people tend to just rush this through. Have you seen a lot of rush written abstracts, Gareth?
Oh, many, many, many. People will do this at the end. I think that's a good idea to write the abstract at the end of the article writing process, but you don't want to just do it like, in 5 minutes and then move on. It's really, really important that you put the effort, the energy into this, because as we've talked about before, and as we'll talk about again now, many journals base their decisions on the abstract alone. This may be all that an editor reads of the paper before making a decision about whether or not to send the work out for peer review. So this has to be a concise, standalone piece of writing with a very clear message that accurately reflects the full text of the paper. And we've got a simple 4-question based technique that you can apply if you want to write an effective abstract. You can write down these 4 questions. Actually, they correspond overall to the structure of an STM research article in general, but in sequence, and that's where structure really comes into its own in article writing. If you answer these 4 questions in sequence, you're going to end up with an abstract that you can use, edit, expand, and use as the basis for your next paper, for your next conference presentation. Why did you do the study? Answer that. What did you do? You answer that. What did you find? You answer that. And what did you conclude? And answer that. Why did you do it? What did you do? What did you find? And what did you conclude? If you answer those 4 questions in sequence, you will end up with an abstract that has the required structure. Many journals ask you anyway for this, by the way. They ask you for structured abstracts. You should do it anyway. You can put this structure into your writing. Have a look at these examples later when we send you the recording, along with a certificate at the end of our event today. But in a well-written academic article abstract, you can go with a colored pencil. You can go with one of Donald Trump's Sharpies. You can mark off the answers to those 4 questions that we showed you before. Why did you do it? What did you do? What did you find? And what did you conclude in sequence in the abstract? And here again, you can see another example. Some journals are asking for this structure. You should do it anyway. You don't necessarily need to have subheadings depending on your journal of choice, but you do need that structure in your abstract because of course, readers need to know where they've come from, where they are now, and where they're going. A plot is absolutely critical. As Scott was mentioning before, we are here to help you learn how you can turn your fantastic research ideas and data collection and hypothesis testing into fantastic papers, articles, well written, fantastically crafted, that have the best possible chance of acceptance in your target journal. So having talked about titles, having talked a little bit about abstracts, let's just jump forward and talk about those other sections of a research article briefly in this event today. And don't forget, if you need more, if you'd like to learn more, if you'd like to get longer versions of this presentation, do have a look at the good old Bentham Science YouTube channel in your introduction, which is going to be, by the way, 1,500 to 2,000 words in length. Grab the reader, keep it short, and avoid a literature review. You want to set the scene and give the state of the art in the field relevant to the question that you're addressing in your paper, rather than giving the reader all of that information ad nauseum, everything that's been published on that particular topic. So again, let's have a look at the introduction, and Scott has another quick poll on this particular topic. Scott, how are we doing talking about the introduction in this section of the presentation?
Yeah, the introduction is a section that I find a lot of authors don't quite get right. So let's launch a quick poll and we'll see what our audience thinks today. Let me just get this poll up here. Okay, so here is a poll about the introduction. Hopefully you can see this here. The question is, what should the final sentence or sentences of your introduction always do? Everyone see the poll here? I hope it's visible for everyone.
Hasn't launched, Scott. Hasn't come up.
Okay, let me just try again here. Okay, I'm having some difficulty launching that poll. Let me just try again. Okay, just have to unshare the old poll. Let's try the new one in again here. Introduction poll. Here we go. Okay, great. The question is, what should the final sentence or sentences, plural, of your introduction always do? Summarize the literature, state the research question and approach, introduce your methods, or preview the results. Let's see what our audience thinks.
Great poll, really interesting. Yeah, this is something that we kind of mentioned on one of the earlier slides. If you were paying attention, you would probably know the answer to this. But yeah, it's a great one, really good. And this is a technique that you can apply easily in your own writing.
Okay, let's end the poll there and see what our audience thinks. The most popular answer was B, state the research question and approach. And that is the correct answer. Professor, any thoughts on this? Is that the way you would normally approach an introduction?
Yeah, absolutely. Remember, the shape of an academic paper starts off very broad at the beginning of the introduction, tells people why this research area is so interesting and important, tries to get as many people interested in reading the paper as possible, not just those 5 or 6 other researchers in your particular research area. And then, of course, you narrow it down, finish the introduction with this simple sentence, really aimed at telling people what the paper is going to do. What the paper's going to do. That's the first of our questions from the abstract writing exercise, what you're going to do, and that leads into an effective abstract with an opening sentence that takes people straight to the issue, a brief summary of the controversies and the best evidence, ending your introduction with a crisp and clear research question explaining how you set out to answer the question that you are setting up with the paper. So here's that template. Here's what the poll was all about. Begin your introduction with a question. Keep it broad. Then give your audience, your readers, the state of the art in the middle section of the introduction, and then talk about what the study shows at the end. Bridge into your methods section, which often the data and methods. Here you're going to give all of the methodological details necessary for somebody else to duplicate the work. This is very, very, very important. And one of the biggest mistakes that people make when writing research articles is not to provide enough information in the methods for somebody else to understand what they did and replicate what they did. So this has to be carefully written. And if you have any questions or any concerns, do show your methods section to another researcher in your lab or in your field to ask them, is there enough information in here for somebody else to be able to repeat the study? Because, as I mentioned, extremely common for editors to reject papers or for peer reviewers to have issues with research papers because they cannot replicate what's in the methods section. Similarly, you need enough information so editors don't think that you're hiding something. And so structure your methods like a timeline. What did you do first? What did you do second? What did you do third? Data collection before your data analysis. That's why these sections of research papers have the structure that they do. A simple timeline structure, what you did in the study, build your method section out from that. What did you do first? What did you do second? And what did you do last? Data collection, data analysis, and your results section can follow the same overall structure where you present the results of the study but do not attempt to interpret their meaning. As with the methods, knowing what to include and exclude is a great technique, and we usually recommend that you build your results section, same basic structure as the methods, same sequence of subheadings even in many papers, but build this section out around your figures, the facts, and nothing but the facts. You're not going to interpret anything yet, but make your figures. And often, as we talk about in other webinars and events that we do, the figures, the results section can often be the first part of the research paper that you write as a researcher with the same structure as your methods, the analysis coming after the interpretation of the data collection. Whereas in your discussion, interpretation, you're going to talk about what your results mean, why they might differ from what other researchers have found before. Interpret in light of other published results. Adding additional information. Relate your discussion back to the objectives and the questions that you raised at the beginning. Start your discussion section by giving the readers the answer to the question that your paper seeks to address. The first sentence of your discussion should be the answer to the question that your paper has been set up to address. But don't forget, as you broaden it out in the discussion, giving people more information about where you might go next, future work, areas for research in the future. We don't want to see an expansive essay that goes all over the place. Do start your discussion with a single sentence that states your main findings. And don't forget to talk about both the strengths and the weaknesses of your study, because if you do this and you're open about it in the discussion, peer reviewers and editors can't be quite so nitpicky. You're talking about what your study can't do, you're talking about the limitations of your research. You don't give peer reviewers that opportunity in the way that you write your discussion. So how do your results fit with what's already known? What are the strengths and weaknesses of your study compared to previous ones? Why does your study offer a different conclusion? What does it mean? And avoid that horrible cliche that we do see all the time at the end of research papers. More research will be required if we are to fully answer this question. Don't put that at the end. Don't write that in your research papers. Of course, more research will always be needed. We don't need to know about it from your research paper. We often see the same structure in the discussion, the methods, and the results. And this is why having a structure to the way that you put your papers together is so very important at the outset. Remember, if you forget everything else that we talk about from our event today, the message, the audience, and the structure of the writing, having these elements in mind before you get going, writing your paper will put you in a much better place as you start to put your research article together and building out this IMRAD article structure, the title, the abstract, the introduction, methods, results, and discussion. And again, let me point you in the direction, let me chivvy you over to the Bentham Science YouTube channel if you'd like to learn more about any of these topics, because we only have a limited amount of time in our event together today. But let me say that you will get published if you pick an important research question, if you use the right method to answer that question. You've got to write, as Scott was saying earlier, a short, clear, interesting to read account of your study that follows a tight structure and uses effective writing. And we're here to help. Bentham Science also here to help, but do get in touch with us if you'd like any more information about any of the topics that we've talked about today. But don't get disheartened. It's a difficult road ahead getting research papers published in leading international academic journals, but as our old friend, good old Winston Churchill always used to say, success consists of going from failure to failure without losing any of your enthusiasm. And I certainly do know that from my own life. Scott, how are we doing? Everything going well?
Great. I love that quote from Winston Churchill, one of my favorites. Yeah, words to live by. And yes, if you are new to Bentham Science, I put a link to the free trial into the chat. I'll stick it in there again, just in case you missed it the first time. And again, if you are a library sciences manager, or if you would just like to get access to Bentham at your institution, there's an absolutely free 3-month trial that you can start anytime. There's no obligation. There's no commitment. And I'll put the link into the chat window just now. There's a trial request form that you can fill in. Just takes a moment, and the Bentham team will get back to you and set you up with a free trial. I just put the link into the chat window.
Fantastic. Do have a look at Bentham Science, everybody, if you haven't done so already. I know many of our attendees in these webinars will be coming back again. And so you're thoroughly well published, expert submitters to Bentham Science journals, but many of you will also not be aware of this fantastic publishing opportunity. So do have a look at the link that Scott shared. Do have a look at benthamscience.com as well, because you do have more than 160 journals to choose from. Great stuff.
Great, so check it out. We put the links into the chat window, so feel free to explore some of Bentham's journals and check out that free trial. And we've got some questions coming in, Gareth. Some very interesting questions today. Well, we always get great questions at these events, but in particular, we've got lots of questions from our guests today about research writing. Shall we jump into some?
Let's do it. Fantastic. Great to hear.
Okay, this is a very timely question. I'm actually working on submission support for a research team right now that is in this exact same situation. So our guest is Ella, and Ella asks, hello, Gareth. I'd like to ask about a journal manuscript containing old data cleared by ethics clearance 5 years ago. Is it still suitable for publication? And what about its global novelty value? So it sounds like a two-part question. This is a great question. First of all, is that ethics clearance still valid for data that was cleared 5 years ago? And is there still an audience for a data set that is 5 years old. I'm going through this almost exact situation with a team of authors right now. Professor, as a journal editor and as an author yourself, what would you do with this data set? Would it still be ethically clear now, 5 years later? And would there still be an audience for this data set?
That's a great question. Yeah, thank you for that question. In terms of the ethics side of this, if this was cleared by your institutional ethics review committee or panel, like then it should still be like fine. I mean, because of course, research papers from years ago that have been cleared, the ethical standards that we adhere to have been in place for a number of years. So in answer to the first part of that question, I would say everything should be fine, but there's no harm in resubmitting the work again to your ethics review panel
Reach
just
out.
to make sure
Yeah.
that that is the case. To answer the second part of that, can it be published? Is it still interesting? I mean, that entirely depends upon the subject area. It really, really depends upon the field in which you're working, how fast that field is moving, like what other kinds of research has been done. In some areas, 5 years is almost an eternity of time because an awful lot of work has been done and an awful lot of advance has been made in 5 years. So I can't really answer the second part of that question without knowing more about your subject area. But one quick way to address this, and I presumably you're on top of the literature, like you're an active researcher in your area. So the reason that you're asking this question is because you think there's a good chance that you can still publish this research. So that would imply that not that much has been done subsequent to your work over the last 5 years. But I would also, have a few target journals and reach out to those editors and send them the paper, send them the data, and ask them, like, would this be of interest to your readership? So I hope that's helpful, and that's a great question. Thank you for that question.
Excellent question, a double question there. And thanks for your insights, Professor. And yes, as we always recommend, don't be shy about asking questions. Ask your ethics committee if that's still valid. And don't be shy about sending a pre-submission inquiry to that journal and see if they would be interested in publishing that data set. Great, thank you. Excellent question. Um, Here's a question. I think I can answer this one. Our guest asks, do you know a book, a website, or any source where I could improve my technical English writing? What a fantastic question. I posted a written answer to our guest here, but I'll share this with everyone in the chat here. So I'll post this in the chat, but some free resources that you can try, and then a paid resource or a paid book. First is, I'll paste this in the chat. Purdue University has its OWL Writing Lab, which is a totally free resource. It's been there for years and years. It's one of my favorite places. I send students there all the time. So check that out. That link is in the chat window for you there. The second free resource I would suggest, if you're in a technical field, a STEMS field or science and technical, Google. Google has a completely free technical writing course that you can take. And I put a link to that in the chat as well. So that would be the second free resource. Third is don't be shy about using a large language model like ChatGPT as a personal tutor. You can ask it questions, you can prompt it to analyze your writing and find weaknesses and give you some suggestions on where you need to improve. It can even generate some practice exercises for you. So a combination of well-established, well-thought-out training resources online. Purdue University especially is my top recommendation. You can use ChatGPT as a personal tutor. And then finally, for a print resource, I would recommend Strunk and White, the classic guide for writing. That would be a great book resource. You can find that book for very little money now, or you can get an ebook version. So I think those four resources would be my recommendations. They're all in the chat. Great question, and thank you for asking. And good luck for your self-study journey in improving your technical writing in English. Great question.
Really, really, really. And don't forget about the Bentham Science YouTube channel as well, where there's lots of videos and training that we've done.
Yes, absolutely. Actually, that reminds me, let me put the link again in the chat window. Here's the link to the Bentham Science YouTube channel. You'll see many of our videos there. Great. Excellent question. Thanks for asking that, and best of luck with your studies in technical English writing. Um, Here's a great question. How can I develop a catchy title for a descriptive manuscript on market access for artisanal fisher folk in coastal Kenya. What a fantastic topic. I think general advice for titles like this would be I think we can get a sense of what this paper is about. Rather than give you specific suggestions for a title, perhaps, Gareth, we can give our guests some general advice pointing back to some of the tips you shared today. Keep it short, but not too short so that it's not clear what the paper is about. Avoid questions if possible, because you're a researcher and you're meant to have the answers. Those would be my two top pieces of advice for generating a title for a paper such as that. Professor, any thoughts on best way to approach writing a title for a paper such as this?
Yeah, my initial thought on this question is what is the question that you're addressing with this study? What is
Exactly.
and what is the outcome? What's the message? Like you mentioned, like what the kind of research field is, I guess. But to come up with a snappy, short, eye-catching, alluring, my favorite word, attractive English title, you need to have some information in there about what the study did and what the outcomes are. Not too much because you don't want to give the game away. I mean, without referring again to our good old friend ChatGPT, like I do use that tool and DeepSeek as well, often in situations like this. You can throw in like a bunch of text, prompt it to give you some titles. If you have a target journal in mind, you can ask it to look at titles from that journal. Ask your LLM to look at titles from that journal and give you some suggestions. You could get thousands of suggestions in seconds, and then you can, of course, select from those, would be my advice as well.
I would say the same. And if you have not used large language models like ChatGPT, don't be shy about experimenting with them and trying different prompting approaches. Get it to generate a series of titles for you. Ask it to give you a number of different types of titles. An interrogative title, like a question type title. Ask it to give you five different types of titles, and then choose the one that you feel is most appropriate. By the way, this looks like a fascinating paper. I would read that manuscript. So you've already got my attention. I would say just put some of those same keywords into your title. So yeah, you've already got me, Edward. I would read that paper anytime. Just find a way to put that into the catchiest possible title so you'll get some attention and you'll get some reads and some citations on your paper. Good luck with that. Yeah, that sounds like a fascinating paper. Okay, Gareth, do we have time for perhaps one more question? We've got a couple
Of
others
course,
filtering
yeah,
in.
definitely,
Um,
100%. Let's do it.
yeah, we've got some really excellent questions. Wish we had time to answer absolutely everything. If we didn't get to your question today, we'll try to reach out to you and get an answer for you. So you'll get an email tomorrow from us giving you a link to the full video recording. And there's a transcript as well. So if you missed anything, no stress. You can just review this event and catch any of Gareth's advice you might have missed during the event. It'll all be there. You can
Just
browse and
chatting
scan
with
through
me.
that video and transcript. Yeah, yeah. And we'll send you also a certificate for joining just to show our appreciation. So thank you all for joining us today. And maybe we can squeeze in one final question here. Okay, let's see, just a moment here. This was a question that I answered in the chat, and I'm not sure that I have the expertise to answer this fully, but the question was, if you're writing a paper that's based on a theoretical framework, how would you weave that into your paper? Well, I think the short answer is to follow Garrett's advice and follow that hourglass shape. If you're following a theoretical framework, and I'm just thinking from my own field of like the social sciences or education, then that framework should really be guiding your research question. It should be guiding your methods and how you analyze those results within that framework, and then tie it all back together at the introduction and conclusion. Just as Gareth said, if you're following a framework for that study, it should inform every section of your paper. Gareth, in your field of physical biology, etc., do you write papers on theoretical frameworks?
Yeah, yeah, we do. And if it's a new theoretical framework, you have to talk about it and tell people all the information that they need. But if it's something that's been done or a framework that's been developed and followed by other researchers in the past, then you will not need to explain that framework in great detail in your paper. You can refer to earlier work where this framework has been followed or this framework has been used. Okay, so that's a common question that we get, like how much information about my methods do I need to include in my paper? If it's new, you need to explain it. If it's not new, you can just cite older pieces of work. But another fantastic question. I've really enjoyed this event today, Scott. It's been fantastic, hasn't it? Like, don't forget to follow Bentham Science. They've got a range of different social media channels. Here they are on the screen. Lots of places to find them. But thanks, Scott. Really great to do this together.
My pleasure. Thanks to you, Gareth, as always, for lending us your insights. I always enjoy joining these events with you. I always learn so much. And thanks to all of our guests for joining us today from all around the world. Best of luck to everyone for all the work that you're doing. We wish you the absolute most impact and the greatest success with your work. So, and on behalf of our friends at Bentham Science, thanks to everyone there on the Bentham team as well. And enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. And thank you again, Gareth.